Good evening, everybody. My name is Marcela Cuellar, and I'm a professor in the School of Education, focusing on issues within higher education. And it's my distinct honor and privilege to present our next speaker, who is Dr. Juan Carlos Garibay, and he's currently an assistant professor in the higher education program at the University of Virginia. He earned his PhD in education with an emphasis in higher education and organizational change from the University of California, Los Angeles in 2014. And while he was at UCLA, he served as a research analyst in several research projects that were very prominent, including one at the Higher Education Research Institute, where he worked for 4 years on a national longitudinal study funded by the National Institute of Health and National Science Foundation, examining the experiences of underrepresented students of color in the STEM pipeline. And this was when I first met Juan, when he was just freshly graduated from undergraduate school there at UCLA, and he came into the graduate program, and I was a little more older student. And we were laughing last night because when I first met Juan, he had these long locks of hair. And so although his image changed by the time that he graduated, his commitment to issues of social justice, particularly with the use of quantitative methods, has really remained strong. And so his research uses a variety of statistical methods to examine issues of diversity, equity, social justice, sustainability, environmental justice within higher education. His scholarship has been published in several top-tiered peer-reviewed journals, including the Review of Higher Education, Research in Higher Education, the American Educational Research Journal, the Journal of Research in Science Teaching, and Environmental Education and Research, just to name a few. And Dr. Garibay and I also recently co-authored a book chapter that is aimed at helping Latino high school students navigate the college choice process, but with a particular emphasis with those that want to major in STEM, to provide them with the knowledge that they'll need to enroll in these programs, but also ensure that they're going to persist in these programs. And so in this process, he was the consummate collaborator. We churned out a chapter, we conceptualized it and wrote it in 3 weeks. And we think that it's a pretty great chapter. But one of the things that really just was important for him and for us to include in the chapter, and this was really guided by him, and it's related to his talk today, is he really wanted to emphasize the importance that students could have on their communities and in society with a STEM degree. And so you'll hear a little bit more about that. His future work will continue to interrogate how we can use quantitative research to conceptualize and operationalize measures so that we can examine structural racism in higher education and find ways to create more equitable outcomes, not only in higher education, but society at large. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Garibay, and I'll give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Marcela. And thank you all very much for coming. Really looking forward to hearing your collective comments and questions to get feedback on the work and the direction that I'm taking my work. So just very quickly, so I'll talk a little bit about my research agenda, then I'll give a presentation on a current study that I'm working on. And then if we have time, I'll get into some recent studies that I'm also working on, as well as some future directions. Before I get started, I want to first point out the significance of this talk for me and my family, specifically because of where we are. So on May 27th, 1962, my maternal grandfather first came to the U.S. To work in the peach fields in Marysville, so about 50 miles north from here. But over the course of 22 plus years, he, as well as my maternal grandmother, worked the very hot summers picking and packaging various fruits in the fields of Dixon, which is not too far from here, Winter, which is also very close, Marysville, and Yuba City. So exactly 54 years ago this month, my grandfather started working near Davis. I just wanted to point that out, and obviously in very different conditions. So I just wanted to point that out because I can honestly say that I wouldn't be here in front of you today, 54 years later, if it wasn't for that decision. and he was working, making about $1.25 per hour in those days. So before jumping into my research presentation, I wanted to talk a bit about my research agenda. I would describe myself as a quantitative criticalist, as my research seeks to really unmask inequities faced by marginalized students through quantitative research, design and conduct culturally relevant research that is contextualized, as well as use findings to challenge policies and practices in order to provide more equitable opportunities for students to succeed in higher education and beyond. My work examines the college experience and impact of college, and primarily focuses on students of color and other marginalized populations in higher ed. Two areas that I'm really interested in are students' major and career trajectories and their development of social justice outcomes. So regarding major and career trajectories, I primarily focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And additionally, my work has examined environmental and sustainability education. I believe environmental and sustainability fields represent a really crucial area for a variety of reasons. Climate-related challenges are a major issue affecting many regions in the world, and we know that here in California, right? It's a rapidly expanding field as well. And a major issue that remains is whether people of color who are often hit hardest and face environmental injustice in various communities will be represented, included, and valued in environmental policymaking, knowledge creation in the field more broadly. And in fact, many environmental disciplines are among the most racially homogeneous and predominantly white fields in all of higher education. So when thinking about underrepresentation of students of color, environmental sustainability disciplines, I think, are critical fields to examine. Regarding development of social justice outcomes, these are outcomes that are critical to creating a more equitable and democratic society. So things like views towards others, social responsibility and civic outcomes, and values towards working for social change, just to name a few. And so the work that I'm going to be presenting today combines these various areas that I'm really interested in and essentially falls in the center of the Venn diagram. All right, so the study that I'm presenting today is called Beyond Traditional Measures of Success in STEM, Predictors of Social Agency and Conducting Research for Social Change. So some background. So not many will dispute the enormous impact that science and technological development has had on the parameters of the human condition. But despite tremendous growth in new technologies and advances in science over the last several decades, severe poverty and inequalities remain throughout the world, which research indicates continues to disproportionately impact people of color. Such realities suggest that while advancements in science and technology have had a profound impact on human capacity, the overall impact of science and technology on creating a more equitable society really remains limited. And two common explanations for the limited impact of science and technology on social equity are that the benefits of science have been uneven and exclusive, and that science and technology have often been used in socially and environmentally regressive ways, which I'll touch on hopefully somewhat at the end. While there have been some national calls for STEM graduates to play a more integral role in addressing challenges for the human good, including eliminating severe inequities and injustice around the world, much of the mainstream discourse in the US on the purpose of STEM education is really centered on the need to maintain US economic competitiveness, US global economic competitiveness. So economic-centered perspectives have largely framed the purpose of STEM education and definitions of STEM student success to mostly consider students' STEM proficiencies and degree attainment as really the ultimate measures of STEM college student success. But many scholars in STEM education have advocated for a more comprehensive definition of STEM student success to include these democratic outcomes, because they argue that traditional academic measures really don't address the importance of developing future leaders in STEM who are committed to creating a more democratic society. They do not critique how prioritizing capital's needs in STEM education can easily serve to reproduce the dominant social order, nor do they center the importance of developing marginalized students' transformative potential to critique and improve the conditions of their lives and communities using science and mathematics. And currently, some STEM disciplines and departments are beginning to integrate STEM knowledge and societal issues in educational standards and curriculum, but there is a dearth of research on what college experiences and contexts may help develop STEM students' democratic outcomes, especially over the long term. So in order to help to fill this gap in the literature and inform STEM educational policy and practice, the purpose of this study is to examine the impact of college experiences in institutional contexts on STEM bachelor's degrees, recipients' values towards working for social change through two different ways. So one, through their social political involvement, which is called social agency, and two, through conducting research. So two theoretical frameworks that are used in this study are Weideman's theory of undergraduate student socialization, which emphasizes that a student's background, along with some of the normative contexts in the college, both formal and informal influences of the academic and social contexts of the college, as well as off-campus individuals like parents, all play a role in the development of students' values during their undergraduate years. And given that the study's particular focus is on STEM, undergraduate student development, the study applied a second framework focused on undergraduate socialization within academic departments specifically. And frameworks of undergraduate socialization within academic departments posit that a student's academic major really becomes a significant part of the academic normative context as students take the majority of their college courses within that specific major. And both of these frameworks really emphasize that peers and faculty play a significant role in the socialization of undergraduates. So the study utilized merged data from several national databases, including longitudinal student data from the 2004 Cooperative Institutional Research Program's Freshman Survey and 2011 Post-Baccalaureate Survey, as well as institutional data from the Integrated Post-Secondary Educational Data System. And then I also used aggregate STEM faculty data from the 2007 and 2010 faculty surveys to provide information about the STEM faculty within students' undergraduate contexts. Excuse me. So these data provide a final longitudinal sample of 6,341 STEM bachelor degree recipients across 271 institutions, where 10% were Black, 10% were Latino and Latina, 3% were American Indian and American Indian and Alaska Native, and 14% were Asian American or Pacific Islander. And the primary analytic method that I used to examine the factors that predict STEM bachelor degree recipients' social agency and values towards conducting meaningful research was multi-level modeling. All right, so I won't get into too much detail here, given the time limitations, and I'm already taking too long. The guiding frameworks, though, for undergraduate socialization, along with prior literature, really helped to guide the selection of the variables for the statistical models. And as you can see, so there's the student level, pre-college background characteristics, as well as experiences, college experiences, so the STEM major, specifically the literature talks about engineering, environmental science, and the health professional fields related to these outcomes, experiences with faculty and peers, STEM educational and career prep experiences, some post-undergraduate experiences as well, given that it was over 7 years, and at the institutional level, some structural characteristics, the student peer context, and really the STEM faculty context, which I'll highlight in the findings. Two dependent variables, again, were examined for this study, so social agency, which is a factor that consists of 5 items on the post-baccalaureate survey. And the second dependent variable is a single item also from that same survey instrument and represents students' desire to use research to improve underserved communities. So individuals were asked to indicate whether conducting research that will have a meaningful impact on underserved communities is personally essential, very important, somewhat important, or not important to them. And here are some descriptive statistics. So as you can see, the majority of STEM bachelor degree recipients in the sample tended to see social agency or have low or medium social agency, and only 17.5% had high. And with respect to conducting meaningful research, A majority also felt that it was not important or somewhat important to their lives, and 35.9% said it was very important or very essential. So when comparing, so individually, the results indicate that a large majority of STEM bachelor degree recipients have medium or low social agency and believe conducting meaningful research is not necessarily important or somewhat important to their goals. But when comparing both outcomes, the statistics suggest that overall, STEM bachelor degree recipients seem to rather contribute to the betterment of society by conducting research as opposed to their social political involvement. All right, so research question 1. To what extent do STEM bachelor degree recipients' social agency and value toward conducting meaningful research vary within and between institutions? So the fully unconditional models were analyzed for each dependent variable here and essentially confirmed the nested structure of the data, warranting the use of multi-level modeling techniques, and the importance of context. The ICC's, the interclass correlation coefficients demonstrate the importance of context on these outcomes. Research question 2, so controlling for background characteristics and pre-college characteristics and experiences, what undergraduate socialization experiences with academic disciplines, faculty, and peers predict these 2 outcomes after 7 years of college entry. So the results really indicate, and these are only significant results on one or the other. So the finding, so here's social agency model, and here's the conducting meaningful research model. So the findings related to undergraduate socialization show that the importance of really show the importance of undergraduate majors related to the long-term development of these outcomes for students. So engineers had lower democratic outcomes than other STEM majors, and the health professional had lower values towards conducting meaningful research. Both student-level socialization experiences with faculty, including the study, had positive significant associations with STEM bachelor degree recipients' values towards conducting meaningful research, but did not relate to their social agency 7 years after college entry, which I thought was really interesting. And then with respect to experiences with peers, participation in ethnic cultural club or organization significantly and positively predicted both democratic outcomes. And interestingly, from the 4 measures of peer and faculty socialization, this was the only variable that significantly predicted both outcomes. And both were positive associations. Participation in academic club or professional association had a significant and positive association with social agency specifically, and these findings really connect to prior research that has shown positive relationships between involvement in student organizations and developmental gains in students. So the third research question, controlling for individual characteristics and experiences, what institutional factors such as structural characteristics, peer context, and STEM faculty context predict the social agency and importance of conducting meaningful research of STEM bachelor degree recipients. And so there were several level 2 variables that were significant predictors in the models. The findings indicate that STEM bachelor degree recipients who attended a research institution have higher social agency and values towards conducting meaningful research 7 years after college entry than those who attended a master's comprehensive or other baccalaureate institution for their undergraduate education. Normative contextual effects also seem to play a role, as attending an institution where entering freshmen on average, so your peers, had higher social agency. This was a significant and positive predictor of values towards conducting meaningful research specifically. And finally, one of the most important findings I want to point out for this study, I believe, was that attending an institution where STEM faculty, on average, have higher civic-minded values, significantly and positively related to STEM bachelor degree recipients' social agency. So the civic-minded values factor for faculty is made up of items that measured the extent to which STEM faculty place greater importance on encouraging students to become agents of change and instilling in students a commitment to community service, their views on whether colleges should be actively involved in solving social problems, and that colleges have a responsibility to work with the surrounding community or surrounding communities to address local issues, among several others. So institutions with STEM faculty who have higher civic-minded values may have a different STEM culture than one that is often described in the STEM college education literature. And this normative context seems to support the development of STEM students' desire to improve society through social political involvement, an outcome that is relatively more difficult to achieve for STEM students when compared to conducting meaningful research. So aside from the findings related to undergraduate socialization, very quickly, some other student-level effects supported the theoretical frameworks in prior research. So thinking about background characteristics, students of color compared to white students and women compared to men had higher democratic outcomes, and higher social economic status students, or students from higher socioeconomic backgrounds, had lower values towards conducting meaningful research. I won't really talk about the limitations, but if you're interested, I'm more than happy to chat with you after. So several implications for future research. So applying critical STEM perspectives in STEM higher education literature specifically. Most of this work is found in the K-12 literature. Examining additional educational outcomes, critical to improving the impact of science and technology on equity and the human good. Examining additional college and post-undergraduate experiences as well, especially at the departmental level, and taking a narrower, short-term, and in-depth approach. And I think qualitative research can really highlight some of those experiences within during students' undergraduate careers. Several implications for STEM education policy and practice that emerged from the study. So promoting these educational goals, I think at the national as well as the departmental level. Second, the study has implications for really strategically and effectively utilizing students' strengths and institutional resources to maximize their development. Given that findings show that STEM students' democratic outcomes are influenced by both student and college level variables, institutions that take a more comprehensive approach to student development, so altering their focus from simply providing experiences at an individual level to one that focuses on both individual level experiences and contextual factors, are likely to more effectively increase students' democratic outcomes. And with respect to STEM-related contextual factors, the findings again show that STEM bachelor degree recipients who attended an institution where STEM faculty, on average, have higher civic-minded values, tended to have higher social agency. So I think this has really important implications for STEM faculty development and the culture of STEM education. This contextual finding suggests that for STEM bachelor degree recipients to attain higher levels of social agency, which again the study suggests may be more difficult to achieve than attaining higher values toward conducting meaningful research, it's critical for STEM students to have the support of those with greater authority within STEM fields. If entering STEM students with higher democratic orientations enter particular STEM environments that place less emphasis or may not provide the means to develop students' democratic outcomes, these students may be obliged to find ways to develop their own democratic outcomes without critical departmental and institutional support, or be forced to adapt to the norms of their field and likely reduce their democratic dispositions, or leave the field altogether and find an academic department or field that is more suitable to their democratic orientations. So a strong cultural shift in STEM is critical to help students develop their democratic educational outcomes, may help retain successful students, and may go a long way towards increasing the positive impact on science and technology, of science and technology on equity and the human good. And lastly, learning opportunities that can promote STEM students. They also, the findings also point to learning opportunities that can promote STEM students' democratic outcomes, which has implications for curriculum and program development in STEM education. So specifically, I didn't really get into this in the findings, but so developing students' understanding in particular content areas, as well as particular types of learning opportunities, such as participation in research and or student organizations, can help promote students' outcomes. And finally, the long-term differences that the study has found, both democratic outcomes between students of color and white students, the fact that the blocks of variables comprising the undergraduate environment don't really explain away the differences between students of color and white students. may suggest that the current educational process for STEM students doesn't do enough to address these important differences. Such disparities can also be found across gender and SES, which together I think have important implications for racial, gender, and class dynamics and climate in STEM departments. So students from dominant social groups are afforded an educational process in STEM that doesn't really challenge them to learn about structural inequality or develop their understanding of the importance of working for a more equitable society. STEM departments may further marginalize underrepresented groups, both within STEM and beyond higher education. And on a final note, given that some of the most horrifying cases of discrimination, thought and practice, as well as policy and laws that have been developed in the past, were the direct result of many science and medical professionals, researchers, and educators. My hope is that this work can further push STEM educators, policymakers, and administrators to really think about and address the past and present relationship between science, technology, engineering, and inequality through changing educational processes and the culture within STEM to better prepare future STEM professionals and empower students, especially from marginalized backgrounds, to help rectify structural inequalities. Thank you.